So recently I was sitting here having a talk with one of my friends, and she says that Americans have American privilege in a lot of places throughout the world. And most people do believe that. But after actually being a born American citizen and traveling to nearly 30 countries in the past 3 years, I can tell you that for people that are not American or that are American that have not traveled around the world extensively, you don't know what you're talking about. Because for the most part, race plays a factor into it on whether that privilege is fully allowed or not and accepted or not. And also, there are certain countries that are absolutely intolerant of Americans, and you can actually become a political prisoner, or you could be executed, or anything can happen to you. American privilege is not always what you think it is. And I'm going to break down exactly from my experiences on all levels and all aspects and how I've personally been affected, because I have been affected many times by this, and tell you exactly what the reality is. So make sure you like the video, subscribe, and let's get into it. Now, as you know, the U.S. passport is one of the strongest passports in the world. It is not the strongest passport, but it's not a golden ticket. And in some places, it can save your life, as it did for me before. But in other times, it can put a target on your back. And the twist is that American privilege doesn't always apply equally, especially if you are a black man or woman. And we're going to get into why I say that. No, I'm not victimizing myself. I'm just realizing reality. And I'm going to tell you guys exactly what I mean by that. So where does U.S. privilege work? I'm going to tell you where it will work pretty much guaranteed majority of the time. Strong U.S. allies such as Western Europe, Australia, and I would even go as far as saying South America, considering the fact that the United States has made sure that they've kept their backyard under influence with many CIA coups and uh, regime changes and everything else that they've done throughout history in Latin America. I can even go as far as including places like Japan, places that have diplomatic agreements, legal protections, and public respect for the United States. And that may be changing now, but just saying. If you're arrested or injured in these specific countries that I just named, embassies will intervene quickly to come to your assistance, and local officials usually cooperate. Usually they have respect. So for example, if you get into a fight in Portugal, let's say you get into a fight in Portugal and something happens, you'll be better off getting into that fight in Portugal as opposed to Vietnam. Vietnam is not necessarily an enemy of the United States, but it has a completely different government structure. And if you ask me, I think China has more of a stronghold on a place like Vietnam, especially since they have communist ties with each other over the United States. Look at Brittany Griner when she got arrested in Russia. Whether if you want to use a conspiracy or not, let's just use the example. She was arrested in Russia for a possession charge, right? And because of that, she was held as a political prisoner. Now, if that would have happened in somewhere like Germany, the outcome would have been completely different. Don't think places like Saudi Arabia, you don't have American privilege in Saudi Arabia. They kill journalists from the United States over there. That stuff happens quite often over there, and especially in many Muslim countries in the Middle East. Furthermore, in 2022, an American tourist was mistakenly arrested in Germany, and the U.S. Embassy had him released within 24 hours after they confirmed his American citizenship. Now, medical access in tourist-friendly countries. Places like Thailand, the UAE, Costa Rica, and Mexico offer premium healthcare to foreigners, and especially when you pay in dollars or have international insurance, meaning that you do get a priority when it comes to these sort of scenarios. Hospitals often fast-track Americans because of the assumption that they have that money to pay and will cause international problems if they are mistreated. Countries that have some sort of fear for the United States, fear of sanctions, stuff like that will give you a upper leg in many situations. I can agree with that. A U.S. citizen in Bali received full VIP treatment after a scooter crash because of U.S. insurance coverage and embassy follow-up. The embassy is not useful everywhere, just to be FYI. Let's talk about something that's really important. Emergency evacuations. If there's a war that breaks out, or let's say COVID came around again and they had to evacuate a bunch of people, you need to get back to the United States. Americans usually are often privileged in this scenario, and we're usually one of the first countries to be able to get on a plane or get on a train or wherever we need to go and return back to the United States. While if you guys remember in Ukraine, when the Africans were trying to get back to Africa and they were being held up and damn near being restricted from leaving the country of Ukraine when Russia was invading. But that's different for the United States. For example, whenever the U.S. government had to pull citizens out of Lebanon, Sudan, Israel, and even Afghanistan in the past 20 years, they have had no problem getting Americans out. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can leave it in the comments and I'll correct myself. In 2023, Americans were trapped in Niger, which is in West Africa, in the Sahel region, were among the first to be airlifted. by U.S. forces after a military coup. And you even seen it in Vietnam as well, after the fall of Saigon. Now, let's talk about countries where the U.S. influence or the U.S. privilege does not matter. And then we'll even go down to some personal scenarios where this has happened to me on a positive and negative. Countries with hostile U.S. relations, obviously, places like Iran, Russia, Venezuela, North Korea, they see Americans as political pawns, and that has been done many times throughout history. And I don't think we need to elaborate on that one too much. U.S. citizens can be imprisoned as bargaining chips, and the embassy's hands are pretty much tied because they're not on good relations with that country anyway. For example, do you think if you go, there's not even a U.S. embassy in North Korea, from my understanding, but do you think if you went to North Korea and they held you as a political prisoner, that anybody would really come to help you? No, they would try to make negotiations, but nobody would really be there to help you. And you've seen that with the guy in 2015 that went to a prison in Korea, a work camp, and they pretty much, for the most part, sent him back dead. He wasn't dead, but he might as well have been dead. And furthermore about Brittany Griner, when that happened to her in Russia, she was not seen as protected because she had a U.S. passport. She was seen as a valuable pawn. Big difference. Now, there are many times, and especially in places like Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, where the legal systems are corrupt and police regularly require bribes. And they see Americans as cash cows. And guys, I've dealt with this many, many times. Many times. And this is why I say in places like Africa, right? So I blend in Africa. I'm black. These people here are black. We did a whole video about that in case you don't know what black people look like. I know some of y'all don't. But anyway, in Africa, bribes are normal in the first place. Even locals are having to pay bribes to the police. That stuff is just normal. Now, as an American, not only do you also have that, because being able to bribe the police rather than going to jail is a privilege. I've heard of, and I'm not going to say what country, but I've heard of people getting caught with a certain amount of weed, and it was a life sentence in that country, and they were able to pay $700 and they were off the hook. That is a privilege, because if that happens in Vietnam, you can be executed. If that happens in Bali, you can be executed. That's not American privilege. That's just a corrupt system. And because you are American, if they usually charge the locals $700, well, they're going to ask you for $3,500. And if you don't have a local that can help negotiate, well, then your American privilege was paying 5 times more what the locals would. So just keep that in mind when you're talking about American privilege. That is one way it can work against you, and it is very routinely going to happen. Another example of this is in the Dominican Republic. A U.S. tourist was jailed on false charges and told he could pay to make it disappear. I cannot tell you how many times I've had stuff happen to me. Maybe that I didn't even really break the law. You know, I didn't break the law, and they said, oh, just pay us $100 and we'll go away. That happened recently with a noise complaint in my apartment. And usually the protocol is for the security to come and tell you, hey, turn down the music, tell you again, they'll turn down the music. The third thing is they'll turn off the electricity. And if somehow you're still blasting loud music with your electricity off, then I can see that the protocol is to actually call the police and have them arrest you. But instead, they jump straight to that. And 2 off-duty police officers came to my place and demanded money. So that is an example of a bribe. And because I was American, it was a way higher rate that they were asking me for than they would ask anybody else, because they would assume that you had the money. Now, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but street level crime, especially in specific countries like Latin America, does not give a fuck about your U.S. passport. So if you think you can go to Latin America and have a U.S. privilege, yeah, the people in the favelas in Brazil and like all those drug cartels and gang members, yeah, the police don't want them there anyway. So what the hell makes you think about you pulling out a passport saying from the States is going to help you? If anything, now they're going to hold you for ransom. They were probably going to rob you at first, but now they're going to hold you for ransom. So don't think that criminals in other countries care. I remember I met this one guy in Tanzania, this white guy, and he's like, yeah, if you go to another country as an American and you try to, if somebody tries to rob you, their entire village or their entire neighborhood will turn on them because they were messing with an American. I call absolute bullshit on that. They don't give a damn. They're criminals. They don't give a damn. And another great American privilege you have in places like Latin America is you are actually sought out and targeted to be robbed. If anybody has been to Cartagena, Cali, Colombia, Medellin, Colombia, even places like Rio and Salvador Bahia, Brazil, and many other places in Latin America, Peru, these are all places I've been to, and I can tell you, based off of my nationality, because sometimes you can't blend in, especially with the zone you're in as well. But even if you're talking to a woman and then She finds out you're American. She may be plotting on you for weeks to get you. That is your American privilege. So keep that in mind. Now, let's go to the black side because we do not have the same privileges abroad. And so for you people that say, oh, I don't know, I don't see race, I don't see race, trust me. If I bring one of my white American friends out here, they're going to call the Africans in Kenya will call me a black American. They know exactly what the hell a black American looks like. So let's not even go to that. They don't see race stuff and race doesn't matter because most people in the world have two eyeballs and they can differentiate between white and black people. I don't care what y'all had to say about that. So keep in mind, just because you leave the United States, racism does not stop at the U.S. border. I forgot the guy's name that was during the civil rights movement or something like that. He moved to France because he wanted to escape racism. France, another place, another country that enslaved Africans. Like, what a great idea to do that. So I'm saying that to say, picture this, for example. I've been to places like Uruguay. I've been to places like Argentina. I've been to places like Romania, Poland. And guess what? And even Turkey as well. So in those places, being a black American, imagine, oh, the girls in those countries like that, you got a privilege. They like you because you're in Poland or you're in Romania. They like you because you're a black American. You're an American. They see you as way up here and they way down here. They see you way up here. Yeah. Try being black walking through Poland holding a white woman's hand. That American shit goes out of the window. It's like, yeah, you still a nigga. You know that, right? Like, don't ever forget that. And I have to say it using that word in specific because sometimes when I try to tell delusional black Americans that like to go to European countries and think just because they're American that they have an upper hand, I still have to say, hey, you are still a nigga. Like, you are in Warsaw, Poland. Like, they're not, I'm not going to say that it's just an overtly racist country because I haven't done my research enough to find it, but I've been there. And there's certain things you can see and feel. And I remember going on dates with women in Romania holding their hand. And yeah, everybody's looking at us. I'm like, yeah, I couldn't deal with this shit every day. And you have to be under the impression that Africans look just like us, right? Depending on where they come from as well. So these other countries are having immigration issues with Africans. So they immediately see you as black first. They don't give a damn. They think you might be a black African or a black Brazilian. They don't know. So you start off as black. And then when they see, oh, they find out you're American, maybe they back off a little bit and they're not so harsh because you do have a little privilege. But yeah, you can still get into being a victim of some sort of violent act that these people have done. There's been many Americans that have went to Eastern European countries and experienced violence. So don't think just because you're American that the racist shit stops. Please don't think that. For example, I remember when I was in Poland, I was in Romania, and that same girl I was on a date with, we were sitting at a restaurant eating, and I remember there was an older white Romanian woman just sitting there just staring like this for like, I swear to God, she didn't look away for like 5 minutes. And everywhere we went, people were kind of looking and pointing. She didn't really want to kiss me in public. She wanted to wait till we got back to the house. Ain't nobody dealing with all that, man. Ain't nobody. That's why I'm in Kenya. Ain't nobody dealing with all that. So, but again, you're American, but apparently that's irrelevant. You're not Michael Jordan, so you really don't matter. Even in cases involving law enforcement or emergencies, black Americans sometimes are assumed to be African locals, like I said before, and not granted embassy access right away. And furthermore, why would you want to? I don't see how people justify going to countries where they may be the only black person in places where they mistreat black people. And then you had to be like, oh, well, no, I'm not one of them niggas. I'm one of the good ones. Look, I'm from the United States. Yeah, you got some privilege. But do you really want to be in an environment? Because that means people half-ass don't really want you there. Now, in many parts of Latin America, Africa, and Eastern Europe, black American men are often fetishized or stereotyped as seen as hypermasculine or exotic. And I can say that is very true for places like Latin America, and especially Eastern Europe. But in Africa, I don't think we're seen as exotic. Maybe we're seen as just, maybe they see us the same way we seen them when they come to the United States. Like if an Ethiopian or a Kenyan or a Tanzanian goes to the United States, and yeah, they're still black, but they just different. They just from somewhere else. But in Eastern Europe, yes, it is a fetish. And I can tell you, I've been fetishized many times on many different continents and many different countries. And yeah, just keep that in mind. Some of y'all are okay with that, but I got a long life to live, so I'll let you take that how you want it. And that attention sometimes can seem flattering in the beginning, but it also invites transactional dating, jealousy, or racial resentment. And I can tell you, The first two I just stated, transactional dating, it has happened where women just think, oh, he's American, buy me an iPhone, stupid shit like that. Or jealousy, where I was set up by Michael Jackson in my own apartment. And you guys, if you watch my videos, you know who I really mean Michael Jackson is. But I had Michael Jackson, which was actually a female, set me up because of the assumption, or there's, if you guys have been to, especially in African countries, if you guys have been to African countries, you know that even amongst the women sometimes there can be jealousy, and which is strange because they have a culture of the men taking care of the women. It's more traditional per se, and you would wonder, well, if they assume I have money, why the hell are they jealous? But I guess it's because you come to their country and you making some shit that would have you in poverty, $2,000-3,000 a month in the United States, and you come over here and you're doing stuff that they wish they could do. It's a very foolish mindset to be jealous of that. Don't understand why they don't take advantage of the guy instead. But some of them would rather be provocative and be jealous. So just keep that in mind. And I'm speaking from experience. And especially in Latin America, a place where they white worship like it's going out of style, Black Americans dating in places like Medellin, Colombia, can find themselves being accused of being sex tourists, which I've been labeled a sex tourist. If you guys want to know what I'm talking about, type in CNN Brazil Austin Holleman, and they labeled me a sex tourist there. Now I've been back since then. This is 2023, but this is something that white men have done in Latin America, and I'm not saying that they haven't been caught or they haven't been labeled the same thing in a false way or been accused of things that they didn't do, but what I'm saying is they get away with it more and they have more of a stronghold of white privilege. But being Black in a place like Brazil, where we've already done their history, and a lot of other Latin American countries, it's pretty much like America. Like, yeah, like just because you're American, like we gonna go after your ass. Like you're still a nigga. I keep saying that. Keep that in mind. You can have the same behavior as a white person in some countries and it's totally fine. You do it in Latin America as a Black person, it's not totally fine. Same thing about white guys coming to Africa, right? I can get on here and I can say Kenyan women are so friendly, this and that. And yeah, I have some people that have derogatory things to say about me. But when white people do it, the locals will usually assume that he's spreading HIV on purpose, which I'm not saying or not, but he's spreading HIV on purpose or he's exploiting the women. And because I blend in more and I'm more of a familiar face, it's more accepted for me to do certain things. And that's how race can play into the American privilege. Because you're not going to convince me that I can go to Bulgaria as a Black person. Like I already stand out way too much and then get online and do all these things where it looks like I'm, exploiting or hypersexualizing the women. And then a white guy comes and it's going to be viewed the same way. It's not, because we stand out too much. Even when you guys remember last year, I did a series of videos about white men being more desired in more countries outside of Africa, per se, correct? And same nationality, we're in the same city, we're friends, he's white, I'm Black, and the privilege was completely different. The ass kissing was completely different. Now, I know every chick is not going to like me, but some of the looks that I was getting and some of the treatment I was getting was like, yeah, that's more than she's not interested. That's like some shit she was taught about Black folks. But we're not going to get into it. Go watch the videos from last year, or I might remake those videos. And if you're a Black American and you think you have the privilege everywhere in the world just because you're American, yeah, try going to Turkey. Try going to Turkey and see before you pull out your American passport, see how they treat you. And then even when you pull it out, see what happens. For example, if you're in places that have, tensions with the United States, there was an American influencer once in Egypt that was detained for filming in a restricted zone and accused of being a spy. I remember I met this one Iranian woman in Turkey and she told me that I could never go there. I can go there, but I'm not Muslim, I have tattoos, and I'm Black, so the chances of me being held as a political prisoner would be immediate. She said I wouldn't even last a day if I went to Tehran. And something that I've always said, for the most part, when it comes to getting into trouble, embassies are usually going to be useless. Especially if you're in an African country, Eastern European country. Like I look at the embassies like the UN. In my opinion, I think the embassies are good for like maybe if you need to get a flight out and you don't have the money, or you need to renew your passport or something, you need a notary or something like that. Shit that you could fly back to the United States to get, the embassy could do. But when it comes to getting into real trouble, they usually say something like, we'll monitor it. Basically, we'll be watching the news with everybody else. We'll be doing what everybody else is doing. They're not going to help you. The embassy cannot override local laws. If you're arrested for drugs, assault, or visa issues, they're not going to be able to get you out. They can just visit and offer you a lawyer, something that you could have did by yourself. You could have called your friend from jail and done. Furthermore, Americans caught breaking the law abroad often face harsher sentences because of their nationality. To make an example, because usually they see Americans as the kids of the world that go around and think that they can do whatever they want, and their country is this great power, and we got this military, and if you mess with us, we're going to get you, my country's going to sanction you, or they're going to come invade, or, they think that we have that arrogant attitude, which some of y'all do. So that's why they choose to make an example out of Americans when they do get the chance. For example, there's a guy from the same area that I'm from Dallas. I believe he's playing basketball in Bali or somewhere in Indonesia, right? And he got caught with edibles, and he's now facing the death penalty. Him being American did not get him out of that situation. None of that. So American privilege is real, but it's still conditional. For the Africans and the Latin Americans that think that just because you got a U.S. passport, you the baby Jesus of the world, bullshit. It doesn't work like that. You can still go to jail. You have to pay more in bribes in countries that require bribes, and you don't get to just show up and date and have whatever woman you want. I've even seen Black American women do this, even white American women too, where they feel like just because they're American, like the guy has a pretty much kissed their ass. Like, you want a green, you guys seen that video with the ladies like, you want a green card, come with me. You want a green card, come with me. That's why people choose to make an example out of Americans. So American privileges are absolutely irrelevant in places where the system is very corrupt. There's an authoritarian regime such as like North Korea, or even places like Iran, places like that where there's it's a dictatorship essentially, or places where you look just like another local. So in a place like Africa, I blend in. Yes, because there's Africans that like to say, "Oh, you got the American privilege here." Yeah, that's so I can sit at the restaurant before you do. If we both get caught with weed, I'm gonna be in a worse position than you, because if I had to bribe somebody, I'm gonna have to pay them more. That's not privilege. That's a damn liability. But let me know what you guys think. For the people that think that Americans, for the most part, the best privilege we got is we can fly into the majority of the countries throughout the world without needing a visa. That is the best privilege we got as far as having a U.S. passport. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I love you guys. And like I always say, if you would like to speak with me, click the link in the first pinned comment description, book a consultation. I'll see you guys next time.